Should the Cincinnati Reds consider Hunter Greene untradeable? Well, before you answer that question, there's another question you got to answer, and we're going to answer it on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. My name's Jeff. His name's Steve, and we are glad that you're alongside us here today. We are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have been podcasting about this team for a combined 14 seasons. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every single day. And on today's show, a little bit later on, we're going to discuss the difficult part about the trade deadline and something that Rob Manfred could actually change about that. That's coming up later on in the show. In a few minutes, we'll discuss a key matchup thing that we've got to pay attention to with this Tigers series before the Reds get to the Motor City. And we'll preview that series a little bit in a few minutes. But we want to begin today's show by looking at a recent report that's got everybody up in arms. Quite frankly, neither Steve nor myself really loved the premise of said article. But I do have a key question that I don't necessarily know I completely disavow the article. We'll talk about that here all on today's podcast that is brought to you by FanDuel. Go over to FanDuel.com today. New users get $200 in bonus bets with your first winning $5 bet. All right, Steve, Gordon Wittenmeyer, your favorite Reds beat reporter, wrote an article about why the Reds should trade Hunter Greene. And obviously, that headline in and of itself should spark fury in the hearts of many, but he had an interesting point about the fact that he believes that this trade would not make them a seller. He's not advocating that they trade him for prospects. He believes that they can make a trade for a potential difference maker in the outfield or something like that. My question to you is, because as many Reds fans probably thought when they first saw this, well, Hunter Greene's untouchable, right? Like you can't trade Hunter Greene. But I ask you this, Steve, because if you're going to say that, you got to answer one question. And that is, will this man ever make 30 starts in one season?
That's a very difficult question, and it's probably the question, right? You look at what Hunter Greene's done thus far, and every time he seems to get rolling and he's in a groove and you're like, there he is, he gets hurt. And granted, it's not been his arm. It's been other very frustrating, very wonky injuries. This thing he's doing right now with, is it a groin? Is it the back? Is it like, what is it? Nobody knows. It's very, very frustrating. I've been looking at this and God help me if I have to have a take that agrees with Gordon Grumpy Wittenmeyer. But, at the end of this, the question that I have always said out loud and have always answered is there's nobody that's untradeable. There's nobody that in the right deal can't be moved. So if your answer to no, Hunter Greene's never going to make 30 starts. Yes, we all agree he's an amazing athlete. Yes, we all agree that when he's on, he's one of, if not the best pitcher in baseball. He's definitely up there on a very, very short list. But if you could trade him for somebody that will play 150 games and be a offensive driver, an engine, I don't know why you don't at least hear the offer, why you don't at least consider it. No hard nose is what I'm saying.
Right.
No hard nose just because the GM on the other end of the phone is Hunter Greene. Don't hang up on that guy. Hear him out.
What if, because I know that there were some reports that the Red Sox could be considering this, and I think that might be changing. I think literally any team that goes under 500 is immediately asked a barrage of questions from people of who you trading. And the Red Sox have spent some days under 500. But if they were to make Jarren Duran available, Hunter Greene for Jarren Duran, they both have roughly the same amount of team control. Jarren Duran is on his rookie contract and Hunter Greene, of course, on the contract extension that the Reds signed a few years ago. So it's not as if you're you're getting somebody back that's going to play less than Hunter is.
Jarren Duran is a guy that, I have that conversation about. Jarren Duran in 2024 was 34% better than league average. He led the league in doubles. He led the league in triples, and he added 21 home runs to boot on top of that. That is a lot of extra base hits, my friend. A lot. Finished 8th in MVP voting and was an all-star. That's the kind of deal, though. It would have to be a blockbuster kind of deal in order for me to consider trading away Hunter Greene, because I assume you're talking about doing this season now before the trade deadline.
Yes, this deadline. Yes.
Doing it. And if that's the case, you create a lot of other questions in the starting rotation. Right. We're running Wade Miley out there right now. So if you trade away Hunter Greene, you have to have an answer for the rest of the season that's not Wade Miley. But you look at those offensive numbers and you pencil them into this Reds lineup that on occasion goes, and you put in a guy that almost always goes. Now, I know he's a little bit down from his 134 OPS plus this year. He's 9% better than league average thus far in the season, Jeff. But I entertain this. Is it a 1-for-1 deal?
Hypothetically, yeah.
Probably that's a 1-for-1. I don't think you're going to get more than that. And I don't think you need to give more than that.
No. If you have to give more than that, then it's no.
If this is a real possibility, this would be interesting. And I again, man, Gordon, I
get you thinking.
You gotta have the conversations. And at the end of the day, it's where does your baseball philosophy lie? Mine has always been nobody's untradeable in the right deal. You just have to have a front office that you believe in. Now, Nick Krall has shaken my faith a little bit over, the last calendar year with some of the things he's done. But in a blockbuster deal like that, I think I would trust Nick to have the conversation. I would worry about the Castellinis getting in the way on a deal for Hunter Greene. I would worry about them being like, no, wait, whoa.
You just signed that guy. That's the one guy we gave a contract to.
The one guy we gave a contract to. You can, I could see Bob and Phil short circuiting a little bit, but you got to have these talks, Jeff. This is old school baseball, really. Yeah. Old school baseball, guys. I'm like pre-reserve, like back with the reserve clause. Yeah. Back then, nobody was really untouchable. Like you had to move and shake and trade to fill there weren't all these free agents out there. You couldn't take the off season every year and rebuild your club. You had to do things like this. This is an old school field baseball question. Is like, can you trade your ace if you're going to get an all-star that's 30% better than league average? Well, yeah, you can trade your ace. So I mean, it's got me thinking. I'm upset that it's Gordon. Bring back Charlie Goldsmith, but there you go.
But I also think too, like that's the hard part. Going back to what you said, it's got to be a deal like this. Like there's not there's some different guys that we were talking about. Like, could the Reds go get this guy or that guy? Those aren't the people that we're talking about. We're probably even talking like Jarren Duran's name has actually been mentioned. We're probably talking about a guy's name who hasn't been mentioned is really where they would go with this trade. Like somebody elite. Is what we're looking at here, because make no mistake about it, Hunter Greene is elite. The only question mark he has is availability. He has to be on the field. And as much as I say, I am happy to put up, like if you say we're facing the Pirates in a must-win game and Paul Skeens is on the mound, give me Hunter Greene. But if the availability question forces us to make a different answer, which right now it would, that makes me wonder a little bit. So if there is an opportunity out there, Nick Krall should really explore that. I feel like in years past, in many different scenarios and in many other, focuses of these types of trades, the Reds front office, whether it was Nick Krall or anyone else, the Reds front office balked at that. And maybe that was ownership. Maybe that was ownership blocking a potential move that would have made a lot of sense for the future of the franchise. But right now, if there's a move like this, you could make the present of the franchise a lot better. But again, that's mostly hypothetical. And I think that the answering of the question of will Hunter Greene make 30 starts in a season is the answer to should he be untradeable. And I think in both answers, I'm leaning toward no.
Yeah, it's a tough one, Jeff. these are the reasons we love this game, because you get to hash these kind of things out. The Reds are heading to the Motor City, though, Jeff. There are some key matchups with the best team in baseball, or at least the American League right now. Detroit looks good. They're fun to watch, and the Reds are heading there. We're going to talk about it coming up next. Whether you're gearing up for back-to-back meetings, shuttling kids back and forth to activities, or tackling an endless to-do list, your morning sets the tone for it all. And that's why you should start it with the perfect cup of coffee crafted just for you. Enter Trade. Trade is absolutely amazing. They have a survey that you fill out. You're going to tell them about your likes and a good cup of coffee, and they're going to prepare for you the perfect roast. I have the Carrier Wave here that they put together for me after I took the survey. It has notes of caramel and chocolate and stone fruit, and it is, in fact, the perfect cup of coffee. I love that their prices are comparable to grocery store brands, but that the flavor, it's on a whole different level. And if right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 50% off your 1 month trial at drinktrade.com/lockedonmlb. That's trade.com/lockedonmlb for 50% off your 1 month trial. drinktrade.com/lockedonmlb. Make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the Reds content we've got coming your way. Jeff and I here on the mothership, the Locked On Reds podcast, Monday through Friday, keeping you locked in on the Cincinnati Reds. Tim Daniel, after each and every Reds game, post-cast live. Don't miss those. We've got you covered. Plus, whatever special shows we just drop in along the way. And I'm working on some stuff. There may be some special shows coming here pretty quick. All right, Jeff, let's get into this Detroit series. Look, I told you, I can't remember if I said it actually while we were recording, but I told you last week when we were kind of looking ahead in the schedule that I'm not as worried as some about this Detroit series, because I think this Reds team is kind of built for Comerica Park. We don't got a lot of guys hitting long balls right now, but we got a lot of guys that can put it in the gap. We got a lot of guys that can, hit down those alleys, and Comerica's a big park. And we've got fast guys on the base pass that I think can take advantage of the extra opportunity to run. And I'm kind of looking forward to see how that all plays out, because, a couple gap shots from Ellie, a couple gap shots from Matt McLean. Hopefully he can start hitting them where they ain't. These are fast guys, can get the extra bases out of that deal. I've watched the Reds play there in the past, and it's fun at Comerica. It's good baseball.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see how the pitching matchups line up, because at least on paper, it looks like there's a lot of right-handers ahead, but the Detroit Tigers employ the strategy of using the opener. I wouldn't say super often, but they've got a number of guys that they can do it with. They've done it with Brant Herter. They've done it with Tyler Holton. They've even done it with Sean Gunther in the past, but I think that it's Holton and Herter that the Reds could be seeing as part of this. And I think that the reason for that is it doesn't take a brain surgeon to know that the Reds' best lineup is against right-handed pitching. So if they're just going to have these right-handed starters out there, then I believe that we will see the Tigers really try to throw some different thoughts in front of Terry Francona and be like, if you want to start Gavin Lux and Will Benson, you can, but we're bringing out a left-handed opener to really kind of mess with that thought process, because that's where this lineup could really be a lot of fun at Comerica with those guys in it. I don't necessarily know that I'm as enthused about it with Hampson and Joe.
Never with Hampson and Joe. Well, how would you, if let's say that Tito gives you a call right now and says, Jeff, I'm looking for a coach. I'm managing this team. I would like your thoughts on how do I defeat this opener? Do I run my regular lineup out there and suffer through those first couple innings, or do I adjust the lineup to the handedness of the pitcher?
It's tough because the Reds are such an early game team this year. There's not been that late game comeback that they've had in years past. So it feels like whatever they do in those first couple of innings sort of is the barometer for what's going to happen the rest of the game. So I almost wonder, and that would be the chagrin to a lot of folks. And I think I've cooled on the positioning of where people are in the lineups as much as I used to be. But I think if Terry Francona were building a lineup against an opener, I would say, where is Lux and Benson going to hit? and then you hit, the right-handed counterpart of that player in those spots, and then whenever they bring out the opener, then you put Lux and
So
Benson
you would adjust to the handedness. I
Yes.
think that I'm not sure that I wouldn't just run my lineup out there and suffer for an inning. Maybe try and scoot the lefties around, move them down, maybe even in the lineup. And by the time hopefully
like
you
a
get
half
to
and
them,
half almost.
you've scored a couple runs already, and then it frees you up.
I think there's something to that, because when you look at who has pitched for the Tigers this season, they have two lefties, and those two lefties are the guys that they use as openers. And so I wonder a little bit if you can just suffer through that opener, then you just got right-handers the rest of the way. And they're not going to face Tarek Skubal. He pitched on Thursday. Thank the Lord. So you're not going to get that game where you really have to run Joe and Hampson out there for 3 or 4 at-bats. It's going to be here and there, but then maybe, because that's the only thing is, like, if they don't use the opener and then they bring in that lefty in like the 7th, then do you just suffer through that at-bat? Like, because I kind of think that's the key here, like not placating to the righty-lefty matchups in this one series. We typically advocate for using the righty-lefty matchups as a good strategy, but this one series, that might be an okay thing to lay off of.
And you keep mentioning Connor Joe and Garrett Hampson. We should probably touch on that for just a second. That's because somewhere along the way they have misplaced Austin Hayes.
Yes.
I don't know if they left him in Cleveland or, is he hiding in a rack of clothes down at the Target?
Clevelandish.
Something, So if you didn't catch this, they asked Terry Francona after the game, the final game in Cleveland, what was going on with Austin Hayes. And Terry was about as vague as you could be. Basically what Terry Francona said about Austin Hayes is, out of respect for him, they went and got him another MRI. I'm going to translate and read between the lines there that Austin Hayes said, hey, my foot still hurts. Something's wrong. Let's get another look at it. And they did. Still does not show a fracture, which is good, but shows a very deep bone bruise, which we knew. He's just not healing from it as fast as anybody would have liked. So now we're left with Austin Hayes being day-to-day-ish. Those are the words of Tito Francona. He's day-to-day ish. All of that translates to Austin still hurt. It's gonna be a minute, and we don't know when he's coming back. So yes, Hampson and Joe.
Has there ever been a situation that you put ish on the end of the word and it's a good thing? Like even in a joking environment, when you say ish, that's because you're trying to lessen the impact of the joke.
Right. Or it's your out. The ish is always right. The ish is your cover.
Ish.
Like ish. I said 2 weeks ish. So the fact that it's been 4, it's ish.
Yeah. Like when Hannah asked, did you go to the gym today? Ish. Yeah.
Ish.
I walked to Laney, things like that. No, but I just don't love the messaging around this right now. And they keep referencing this bone bruise. Like this, and like what you said the other day, it's got to be like the worst bone bruise in the history of bone bruises, because dude is still feeling it. And I know that things take time to heal, but man, like it's still affecting him. I think at this point, there's a likelihood he could play the Twin series, but I think there's just a likelihood that if he's cleared to play, they say, you know what, maybe we let you take a couple hacks in Louisville. Because I think that might be the smart approach with him at this point, making sure that he's all right. Let him take a few hacks in Louisville. How does he recover? Is that something that aggravates it more? Like, I think probably the worst thing that they could do would be to bring him back for the series opener against the Twins, and then he gets one at bat, something happens, he leaves the game again. Because at that point, all of us would have made up our minds that we can't trust this guy the rest of the season. So let's slow play that a little bit.
Yeah, I can't argue that logic. And really, you can't rush him back too soon because, it's not like there's not a opportunity that he's going to foul another ball off his foot. So it can happen. I hope they're rigging up some kind of
like a super
cushion pad inside his shoe or something, which may also affect how he's swinging the bat. So
we're like a
time's going to tell with him
on there.
Something like just man, just bubble wrap him at this point. He's another one, piggybacking off of that Hunter Greene talk. Like, is Hunter Greene going to give you 30 starts? He's elite when he's healthy. Austin Hayes has been really, really good when he's healthy. And every time he gets kind of going and in a groove, another wonky injury.
How do we get this?
It's frustrating.
Cincinnati sports, man. Like, I mean, it's the whole argument of injury prone typically belies the fact that you keep re-injuring the same thing. And that's not what Hunter Greene's doing. That's not what Austin Hayes is doing. That's not what Nick Senzel did. That's not what, let's go over to the other side of the banks for a second. That's not what Tyler Eifert did. Those guys just had a hard time being on the field. And I think that's a tough thing to really explain your way around, because as elite as you are when you're on the field, if you ain't on the field, then what's it matter? So that's kind of the hard part with this. I really want Austin Hayes to figure this out, because the Reds could really use him and get rid of like Garrett Hampson or something.
Yeah, got to be available.
But I know this, Steve. The trade deadline is looming. We are getting into the trade season when it comes to the Major League Baseball season, and I think it's flawed, and I think it's difficult, and I think it can be fixed. The NBA Finals rage on, and the MLB season's raging on too. That means you got to head on over to FanDuel and take advantage of all the action, because they've got point spreads, they've got money lines, they got prop bets galore. And I'm looking at the NBA Finals tonight. The Pacers are getting 6 points at home. Has anyone watched the Pacers in these playoffs? They're up 2-1, and they're 6-point underdogs. Plus, I'm also thinking about this. I might make a crazy parlay, because I'm feeling the Ellie parlay again. He's looking really good at the plate. I think he's going to bring them stolen bases back. If you put the Ellie parlay together with the Pacers covering 6 points, you're actually going to get odds of plus 1,000. So, you put $10 and then you make $100 off of that. Boom. You're going to have yourself a good night. The LE parlay, by the way, record 2+ total bases, record a run, and to record a stolen base, and the Pacers to cover 6 points. That's over on FanDuel. New users can get $200 in bonus bets with your first winning $5 bet. I'd put it on that crazy parlay tonight. I think I'm going to go do that right now. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. All right, got it down. If you can't watch us on YouTube, you can always listen to us on your favorite podcast app. We're seriously on all of them out there. Check us out today. And when you're done watching today's show or listening to today's show, go check out Locked On MLB Game Night. They watch every game every night so that you don't have to. That's over on the Locked On MLB feed. All right, Steve. The Reds, are they buyers? Are they sellers? The Atlanta Braves, are they buyers? Are they sellers? The Boston Red Sox, are they buyers? Are they sellers? In years past, it was a little bit easier, not super easy, but it was a little bit easier to answer that question, because not everybody made the playoffs. And I get it, not everybody makes the playoffs now, but there's a whole bunch more people make the playoffs nowadays than they used to. So when everybody feels like they can make the playoffs, nobody feels like they can sell. And I always hear this argument, and one of the arguments that Gordon made in his article talking about Hunter Greene is it's a seller's market. It's because the demand is higher than the supply, because there won't be a lot of teams that believe that they're out of it enough to sell off and make trades and things like that. So with all that being said, I think because of this expanded playoff era that we are in, the super expansion era anyway, I'll get on that tangent in a minute. But the super expansion era playoffs that we are in, they need to push back the trade deadline. It's too early.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty good point, Jeff. I think you're probably onto something. Hashtag Manfred hates baseball never really liked the game, so he doesn't understand the nuances of things like this. So, expand the playoffs. Yeah, more revenue, more whatever. Teams don't have to spend as much to try as hard. Yay. And don't think about these other impacts. And you're right, because there are now so many teams that think, we could sneak on in to this playoffs and, make a little extra money and keep people coming to the ballpark longer during the season. We're not going to sell. Well, you're right. It eliminates the ability for teams that really do need to go out and get somebody to be able to go out and get somebody. You've got to be willing to trade your ace for a rental. And that's really the only way to get a deal done. And that's not going to work in today's baseball. So I like the idea of revisiting this and moving the deadline a little bit. You and I were kicking it around as we were getting ready, and I think we both landed on August 15th as being a good spot to kind of say teams at that point should be like, okay, well, we're probably not going to get there. Let's flip a few of these contracts and get something in return. I think teams would be more willing then to make a move than they're going to be when the actual trade deadline comes around.
And I think, somebody's probably thinking, August, you want to push it back 2 weeks. Congrats, guys. You guys get a Nobel Peace Prize. But what we think about with this is think about what happened in 2023 with the Reds. On August 1st, they were in first place. A week later, they weren't. A week later, they were struggling. They were scuffling. It was clear that they needed pitching, and they didn't go get it. We all were saying that they needed pitching, and they still didn't go get it, but that's beside the point. But at that point, it was probably obvious to Nick Krall, man, I missed the boat on that. So a little bit of this is covering for front offices that aren't exactly the most shrewd. Like the Cleveland Guardians of the world and the Tampa Bay Rays of the world would probably be like, we don't need to push back the trade deadline. We got this figured out. But other teams, like the Reds, would probably really benefit from something like this because you would have a clearer picture of where you stand. And there's always this team, like what happened last year with these Tigers that the Reds are about to play, that they have this late season surge and they really push forward. The Tigers traded, they sold at the deadline last year. They actually traded Jack Flaherty to Baltimore, who Jack Flaherty's back, and I think we'll see him in this series. But they traded Jack Flaherty to Baltimore, and then they went on a run. So as weird and out there as that is, that team exists every year. And when you have a market that is full of buyers, I'm no economic major here, but when you got a market that's full of buyers and nobody's selling, what are you really doing?
Yeah, everybody's vying for the same 3-bedroom house. The price is just going up and up and up and up, right? I would entertain, Jeff. I would even entertain pushing it out like to the 21st, like one more week, at a third week. But then that still leaves you, a decent amount of time after you've made that acquisition for it to make a difference.
Over a month. Right.
What I know is I think you're onto something that this should be something that they look at as far as changing and adjusting based on this new playoff structure in order to, bring, the trade deadline's exciting, especially if you feel like your team's on the cusp and you're hoping they go out and get us somebody. By moving the trade deadline, you would create a little bit more opportunity, I think, to add that excitement back into baseball that we used to have when a bunch of teams were out of it already. And everybody was glued to ESPN or glued to MLB Network, waiting to hear, watching the ticker, waiting for something to happen, back in the day. So it's time to make those changes. So we get that again, and you'll be watching your YouTube feed, refresh, waiting for Locked On Reds to break the trade. That's going to be the new version of that.
Exactly. And that's what I want from a fan standpoint, but I think that would be good for the sport too. Cause like, as we're sitting here now in the middle of June, like nobody's making moves because everybody's waiting for the deadline to see exactly where they think they are. Like I low key think there's going to be a headline on July 31st on the deadline day that like a general manager says something to the effect, probably not these words, although I would love it if he said these words exactly, but something to the effect of, well, we won today. And it just felt like we needed an extra boost. And it's like, today was the day that you really felt like you needed to go make a trip. What happened to the rest of anyway? That's just what I see happening. And I believe you push this out 2 weeks, you'll open it up to more sellers. Like right now, the only sellers are the Rockies and the Marlins. And the only player that on any of those teams that anybody wants is Sandy Alcantara. And then you maybe make the case for like Jesus Sanchez. You're not talking about any Rockies in those deals. You're not really talking about anybody else on the Marlins in those deals. And so that means that you got 28 other teams that want 2 players. Like, you got to fix this.
And that, Jeff, is where we're going to wrap it up for today. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen each and every day. Go check out the Locked On MLB channel as a whole. Sully's over there putting out great content, keeping you covered on a league-wide perspective. And they've got game night going now, folks. They watch every single game, so you don't have to. Go check them out. It's available in the Locked On MLB feed, so go check them out. Thanks, as always, for being an everydayer. If you haven't clicked subscribe, please do so. We will be back in your feed on Monday, reviewing this Detroit Tigers series and getting you set for the Minnesota Twins. Until then, we'll keep gathering up the news, the notes, the information, and the reports to keep you locked on Reds every single day.
Pacers +6.
I wonder if that guy wants to buy the Reds.
God, I wish.